So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about what he's been working on and how he's working with his team on their developer portal and their developer experience. Hi Ben, good to see you again. I can't hear you yet. Can you say something?
Sorry, yes, more than one mute. Can you hear me now?
There you go. So that wasn't that long ago. Since
no, it wasn't. It was only a few weeks ago.
So really happy to have you here on the track, and very much looking forward to your talk. I'll go turn off my video. I'll stay on until you've got everything live.
Just sharing my screen now. Can everyone see?
Yep, I can see it. Can you click on the hide in the bottom?
Sure thing.
Yes, perfect. I think you're good to go.
Cool. So, hello everyone. I'm Ben Gamble, as previously announced. I'm here to talk about a bit about docs, demos, and developer experience. It chimes quite nicely into following on from what the previous speaker just talked about. And yeah, so a bit about me first. I'm head of DevRel at Ably, Realtime. I insist everyone reads the Phoenix project. I literally buy people copies of it and send them until they read it. I will just keep talking about cool stuff, and I rarely do pass an API I don't want to try. Part of why I'm here. It's just great fun to see how all these things interact. But also, we recently won an award for our developer experience and some stuff about our dev portal. And it's kind of like we wanted to really share a bit about our journey for developer experience. So quick intro to Ably, real-time communication platform used by a lot of people for a lot of things. All of the usual customer logos, but what is the TLDR? We're a fast, highly available public service built to scale. What this means is it's like Kafka, but goes from anywhere to anywhere. So it's like mobile devices being fanned out to from a server publishing sports scores. It's medical devices publishing, critical life critical data back. It's logistics companies sending their location to their customers or to their routing services. But it's also chat, and it's also like chat from one to many, many to one, many to many, and all these things in between, because quite frankly, it's all about having a reliable service at the lowest level. So let's talk about developer experience. The key thing about what we offer is we are right down in the weeds. Whereas the previous talk was talking about suits and hoodies, we're more hoodies and then going further down that stack, if you imagine it, to the proverbial pocket protectors, if you remember the memes from the 90s. So the thing to understand is we are a developer product. Like at best, we give you code, but on average, you're often just there with documentation to use one of our APIs to build yours, because people build products on APIs these days, right? Previously, it was their own, which is the kind of the big thing in the early 2000s. And now it's out of third-party APIs. Like, why would you build your own queue when you can use AMQP? Why would you build your own messaging service when you could use Ably? And why would you, run your own data center when you can use AWS? And the critical thing that differentiates a lot of these services is the developer experience. As a developer, how do I get X done? In some respects, your experience is almost as important as your functionality at this point, because unless the experience is good enough, no one's going to get to your functionality. Like, all tools have learning curves, right? And we all know that they can be incredibly steep. And with powerful tools, and most APIs are quite powerful, that curve is not exactly a nice straight line. It can often be a cliff, and it can often get much harder as you go along. And there are many pitfalls along the way. It's really about trying to make sure that, you get someone on board and they don't just fall off. The obvious analogy here is in games. If you've ever played a game called Dark Souls, the first thing you run into is a boss that will just take you out repeatedly. And they use that as a gate to try and get players' engagement up. But with APIs, that's not something we can afford to do. We will lose people to our competitors immediately because they will not do anything until they can use our APIs. So let's start with the absolute basics. And back to the kind of just what I just mentioned is try before you buy is kind of the watchword here. This is just table stakes stuff, So it's so important that we had to end up putting it on the actual front page twice because, quite frankly, people missed it. It's too easy not to call out that what you're doing is available free to try. And if you can't try it for free, people will not use it. The next thing is like having code you can run. So like actually being able to click something and see it happen in front of you is once again like a massively powerful tool. I know this will not work for a lot of people, but the sooner you can get someone to running their code, some code of yours, and seeing what your product can really do, even if it's under ideal circumstances, can just give them this immediacy to show what you're selling is real. There's nothing worse than when you're trying to like buy a service and you can't see it working. You can't touch it. You can't debug it. There's no way to actually understand it because you can't reason about something you don't fully understand. That's great when you have a fully qualified customer come up and say, hey, I've used a competitor. Tell me your features where you're different and I'll run with it and trust you. But when someone doesn't fully understand what you're there to give them, you need to get them to live as soon as possible. But as I said, that is table stakes. That just gets you in the door. What do you do when people want to do more than just dabble? Great, you've got to sign up. Someone came in, they tried it without signing up. They didn't have to put a credit card in. They signed up. They made an account. And now we get to the kind of the next question about like this kind of developer experience, which is the idea of samples, demos, and tutorials. These all serve a slightly different purpose in getting that user to go from I'm interested to I'm using to I'm paying. And this is where we kind of run into the kind of thing. So what my team does, particularly, is maintain these in our labs, which is the idea of anything we've built for you to see what's possible. So some organizations have a separate GitHub org. Some have them all hosted up on their main one. Due to the fact that we have like a lot of open source but core products things, we have a separation because we will guarantee like certain parts of what we build, which is open source, and we will not guarantee others. And this is where we kind of have this differentiation between samples and demos, which was listed above, and tutorials, which are about giving someone a bit of guidance to get a specific problem solved. And you have to have your tutorials across everything you support. There's nothing worse than when you run into gaps in tutorials. And I know because we have them, and it is one of those things where we are consistently working to fix. Developer experience is a journey. You're never done. And as the previous speaker mentioned, it's about trying to actually make sure that you're constantly evolving. Because samples will give you a starting point. This is something like, I need to authorize with your service. Here is a sample which will show you how to authorize. Here is a sample, or in our case, which will show you how to receive and filter messages. This is a sample that will allow you to create channels or topics, as they're often known in other services, on this service. Or at a bank, it might be, this is a sample of how to authorize a payment or reject a payment. It's a bit different from a demo, which is there to show what's possible. A demo being something which is built out and actually offers a rounded experience. The idea being that you don't, just showing how to authorize is not a demo. It's not enough to show someone what really can happen, right? It won't give your product its kind of magic. You won't differentiate yourself on a sample. But what you will do on a demo is show why you are special, why your service matters to a user, at least in their context. And tutorials are there to spell out important details. It's all well and good to have samples for obvious things, like this is how you do, a login sample. And because that will end up being customized to a customer, you don't need to go into great detail. But when it really matters, like in our case, some of our authentication is quite complex, and it's quite important to get it right. And there are some red herrings in the way you can do things because we have to support a lot of different methodologies. So we spell things out for you. This is where a tutorial might link you, in our case, would link you through how to set up our specific kind of tokens with specific user roles so that you don't allow an abuse of the system. Now, these have to be tutorials and they have to be spelled out because you need to be explicit at every point about why an action is being taken. The developer experience of someone who just runs with demo code and hopes to get somewhere done is why you read some of the more kind of scathing posts on places like Stack Overflow. It's the reason why it's actually very hard to help some customers when they come in on support is they've just run through some demo they've seen somewhere. They saw something cool, they borrowed some code, but the critical parts that really matter were never spelled out for them. And if you don't have these tutorials to link to, when inevitably someone didn't read them first, you're going to be in this problem of consistently explaining. A lot of developer experience evolving over time is about making note of where these pain points are and building in samples for the stuff which just isn't obvious, demos for the things people don't see, and tutorials for the problems people have. So what happens next? You've gone past people who understand your service, but they're going to now be a bit challenging. These are like the valued customers. They're often what we'd call enterprise grade, or the ones who really want to pay, those wonderful but still troubling customers because they seem to know your product better than you do. And this is where we get to documentation. So to quote Larry Wall about documentation, there's never enough documentation and there's too much documentation. And it's often both true. I kind of disagree a little with this, as in I would say there is never enough documentation is nearly always the truth. However, if it feels that there's too much, it nearly always means that it's not been fully thought out. Documentation is a full art of its own. There's a reason why tech writers are both amazing to have, hard to find, and when you have them, you cherish them. Their job is to try and take the noise of your system and kind of concatenate it down into something that could be easily absorbed. So this is a bit of a sample from some of ours. And because of we're an API you build your APIs on top of or power your APIs with, we have a lot of documentation for our various SDKs and our actual APIs themselves. But quite honestly, the reason we have SDKs is because our APIs are some of our APIs are complex enough that the documentation is quite terrifying. I think in the multi-tens of thousands of words for some of our specifications because they're detailed. And what happens then is you have a split between enough, maybe, and in this particular case, this is on one side, which is about our authentication. And it gets most people where they need to be. It links to tutorials, and it gives this kind of feel. And to kind of go to the next one is this too much, which is actually from our specification doc. It links out to proper things. It follows all of the standards you'd expect, has defined words and everything else. Now, the real thing is that the first piece is often enough, but not always. The second one is nearly always it nearly always has the full information, but it is too much for most users. The problem is it's not that things are too much in general. It's that for the user in question, they just don't have enough time to go in and get the information they need to abstract, which is why it's actually the challenge and why I would always go from trying to have more than one level of documentation. Now, the next question that always comes up in these things is, how about generating your docs? Because fundamentally, we've got someone on board, they've sort of made that tacit agreement that they want to use your product, the particular developer-focused product. They kind of like what you've done. They've seen your talks, they've seen your videos, they've used the demo, they've clicked about a bit. And now they're trying to dig in deeper. And, your documentation, well, you don't want to have to write it all because, there's just a lot to write. So, and you want to maintain it, and it's expensive to maintain by hand. So you want to generate it. Firstly, there are various specifications that do support this. Here is the gamut of them. Async API being one we kind of really support because with a few of our products, because it is about asynchronous data. Great new specification. Shout out to Fran, Postman, who recently decided to back the Async API initiative in a big way, which is really cool to hear. But the point here is that these things are machine readable specs that generate documentation. And to be honest, they serve a purpose. But machine readable does not really mean human readable. And it's really there to try and give you that kind of stopgap. The kind of documentation I was mentioning earlier with links to tutorials and things is the kind of the standard we always want to get to. We'll be honest, we use Async API a lot because we support here's 7 languages, 4 protocols for one of our hub products, which is our open streamed stuff. And to be honest, actually writing proper documentation for that many combinations of things would just be untenable. There are about 20 products that we've put up, which are just open stream data, and having 28 plus pieces of documentation per product is untenable. So the specifications really do help here. However, they are really about just giving you coverage. Use these, the better you can get out of these things, and they do improve over time, it is really useful. But fundamentally, when you're trying to get someone on board and give them that really solid developer experience, at least for that first onboard, you need more than this. This is a great way to keep people happy once they're on board, to make sure that they understand your system. But once again, it never quite tells the full story. Now, Hiram's law is interesting because it's all about the idea of if it can be done, it will be used. And corollary, of course, is as long as you have more than one or more users, they will be using almost everything you do in ways you don't really expect. Now, this is true. The number of times I've had a chat with a client or an architecture call to understand how they're using our service and realize that I never thought it could even be used this way, or would never have recommended that in 100 years. Well, the short version is they wanted it that way. They went out and did it. But, if you onboard people the right way, at least your customers and users have the right kind of, these ones can be the exceptions rather than the norm. You're never trying to optimize for all. You're always trying to go the old 80-20 here, saying if 80% of our developers are using the 20% of kind of methodologies, which are the ones that make sense, the ones which we recommend wholeheartedly, because we came through a process that made sense. They read the right documentation, which led them to the right tutorials. They had the right demonstrations and everything else. This means that you can basically kind of weed out these kind of true exception cases and let them hopefully be your wonderful whales who pay you all the money to use your products in weird ways. So to kind of round up a bit of this is like demos get them to use the API. Demos are that kind of thing you throw out to show this is cool enough that you should use it. Docs keep them out of trouble. Docs are what people should rely on to know, I got something wrong. Why is this not shaped right? Why is my schema out of whack? You can go find it in docs. And developer experience, to collect it all together, is about getting them to come back. Like there's an analogy in running apps, which is that it's never about getting someone to run once. It's about getting them to run twice. The kind of the next step feeling. If your developer experience is good enough, people come back. Now for a demo. So I'm going to send this link around. Sorry, I took the wrong thing there. So if you can still see my screen. So I'm going to send this link into the event chat. Anyone to try it? So this is basically an idea which we've been trying to kind of live by effectively for our documentation. So this is the idea of like having a demo with docs inline. This is new and is going live is live now to try and is open for everyone to have a go with, and is on our lab's GitHub if you want to see what the code looks like. But the point here is, as you, let's say, go in as a chat user, it'll give you the actual code, which it is there. So this is your sample. Here is a link to the actual documentation of the feature itself, ready to work with, and it all works live. And the idea is, like, you get to say hi, you get to see all this stuff, you get to see your messages come through. Anyone else who can click on the link and try it can see this actually working live. It is genuinely running. If you scroll up through here, you see that we're retrieving messages from an Airtable database to demonstrate this using their REST API here. And we include their docs because it's important to us. Hi, Steve. Good to have you actually clicking through the demo. So as you try various things, you'll see that the play-by-play of what's going on updates live. This is just a Vue.js component reacting to what's going on. But the point here is that as we build out our demos, we're trying to create this kind of feeling of interaction, that you never are in the dark about why things are happening and what is going on. We want to make sure that as a user lands and tries this, they say, hey, I want to build chat, we send them here. They're never in the dark of why things are happening. They can see on the panel here what's happening, why, and what the code is doing. The code itself is all open, of course, and they can have a go. You can scroll up, by the way, and see the messages of our internal team chats. If you go up, I believe there are nursery rhymes, which we sent each other because someone's child was playing in the background. one time. But yes, the real point is that you kind of have to bring the whole journey together. You can't just have a demo. You can't just have a sample. You can't just have a tutorial. And you can't just have docs. You're not going to get that full rounded experience unless you have thought it through end to end. And it is an ongoing process. Like, we really kicked it up a gear after a podcast for one of our main customers was actually ribbing us for our developer experience not being great, and our competitor having a better one, but our product winning out due to technical superiority, which was wonderful for our tech team and made my team worry. So we went out there to build things like this. And Steve, if you want to borrow this idea, please contact me. I'll show you the code base. We'd love to do a collaboration. And anyone who wants to collaborate on demos like this, please just reach out. We want to do more things like this and kind of just promote the idea that you can do more in line.
So you're already doing my job.
Well, Christoph, a lot of this is inspired by the chat we had on that.
Thank you for the awesome talk and for joining us and presenting your work. We have probably one question, maybe two. So maybe a short one to start with. Like, how many people are doing this? Like, how big is the team that is building this?
So this team actually is a bit of an interesting one. There's our core engineering team who build out our big distributed system, because that's what Ably really is basically a massive pile of distributed systems problems being solved behind the scenes. The front end, which you're seeing now, is my team in developer relations, plus the product team. And so it's basically, there's 5 of us in developer relations support, and there's about 3 people in product. But but core focus, there's about 4 of us who really kind of are driving forward the demos and the examples and trying to meld the two. There's new people focused just on docs as well, but at the beginning of the year there was just 3, and now it's quite a lot more.
Yeah. So maybe like the technology that you used to build this, could you tell maybe a little bit more about that? Like, I know you said like go check out our code. But maybe just a short, like a 5-second version of.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So in this particular case, I'll just flip back to this. So in this case, what you're seeing here is this is Ably channels are connecting every single user to a backend server, which does the distribution of the chat messages. Then things like rewind. So when we're using a series of Ably features like rewind, which allow you to just get the last part of the stream, so it's like attaching early. This whole thing is in Vue.js, which basically what we're doing is effectively having the component on the right just react to various function calls. And based off what they are, we have pre-populated that side panel to have various links to our documentation, and to actually and it's currently got hard-coded chat segments, things like that, segments of code. In the long term, we're thinking to build out an annotation library for this. So the idea is you can literally annotate your code and generate something like this, because it's almost too useful. Because it started off as just one of my team, Shushtika, she just built this because she thought it would be cool. And it became like, this is too good. We got to do more.
So am I getting this right? You're dogfooding your own product to build your documentation?
It's on our list of things to do right now, is to build some documentation stuff to help us document our product. And we'll be documenting that as well. It is turtles all the way down.
Turtles all the way down. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's really inspiring. And that's a small team to do a lot of heavy lifting.
It's interesting. Like, it is we are a small team in DevRel, but the thing about it's like the old on the shoulders of giants thing, as we say, right? Like, we're basically leveraging best practice we see everywhere else. Talks like this are wonderful, and everyone wants to up their game. No one wants to be left behind, and things like this are about saying, those guys are great. Let's go talk to them. Let's learn from them. And we do this a lot. And that's why, if you want to talk to me about this, please do. I'd love to just share experiences and understand where we all are, because if all APIs were easier to use, we'd get better products.
I would be interested in having a chat about, if you could like integrate this in other people's, like basically this is like your a front end for your product that is doing your documentation. And maybe this is something you could also have on other dev portals. And that could maybe be a product in its own right.
It genuinely could be. And like, we actually mooted something along those lines of just spooling it out. But as of right now, I'll be honest, this is a bit handcrafted, hence why it's currently in exploration. But like, it's something we're going to try and roll out on more of our demonstrations as we go forward, because it just kind of really gives you that feel of like interactivity and understanding. Because like, we've all been there with a demo and going, right, got to turn on the debugger, stop the demo, see what was called. There are other answers. People like C-Code have some really cool things where you can literally share live debugging screens. But quite frankly, we wanted more than that. We didn't want to stop the flow. We wanted the link to the documentation in just a consumable manner, so that as you just are browsing, you're not lost.
Yeah, very, very cool. Awesome job. Congratulations again on winning all those awards.
That was a fun day. I did not expect to come back the second time for the award.